I'm sitting here to myself thinking, every day I tell you guys, I hope you've had a wonderful day. I hope you guys are doing great. I sincerely do. I know today, Saturday, no other day like it seems. Then tomorrow, another sleeping day. If you don't have to work, if you have to work, I'm sorry about that. But another glorious day. And then I go into playing true crime videos. How much opposite of the spectrum do you have to be for that? Like, love you guys. Hope you guys are all doing great. Have a wonderful day. Let's talk about this chick getting murdered now. Life's ironic like that, though. You know, these videos are so interesting because it's out of the norm of what normal people and whatever normalcy is to me might not be to you, but just out of whatever necessity in their mind that they do what they do is unfathomable to 99% of us. And that's what just draws us into this kind of topic. And how many psychologists have tried to you know analyze and study minds of killers and serial killers and rapists, freaking all kinds of people. And who knows what makes it up? I mean, I know they always say the early warning signs are, torturing of animals, killing animals, wetting the bed, things like that. And I definitely don't fall on that spectrum. I don't even like squishing a spider. I always have to catch it and go release it outside. I just feel bad squishing it. Like, it hasn't done anything to me yet. If it does and I catch it like on me, then maybe I'll probably squish it. Like if it bites me, but until then, he's free to go. Go let him live out in nature where he belongs. But anyways, this is actually a request from, and she wrote this a while ago, and I'm sorry that I'm just getting to it now. AM space S. And the story is going to be about, sorry, there's my beautiful daughter. That's Daddy's little girl right there. I forgot to clear the picture down because I just set it as my background, and this computer screen is so friggin' massive that it made it all blurry. Sorry about that. But let's go ahead and see here. Okay. I don't know why it keeps on doing this. All right, so it is Just Thoughts Lounge, and it's on Eddie Ray Routh. Why did all these characters, all these killers always have like three names, like John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald? Let's see here. I know who he is. I know of him. I just don't know the whole story of him. So this will be one. This will be an interesting one. Let's see. I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me. I don't know what happened to my pause button, or else I'd be hitting that, but it disappeared on me. So, how's your guys' day going? Do anything fun? Yeah, me too. I'm probably like looking right at it and don't see it. Oh, here we go. All right, let's give this a look see. And like I said, this is a request from AM space S. So thank you for the request, and sorry that it took me so long to get to it.
Hey, Marie, you alright back there? Just so nervous about what's been happening in my life today. I don't know what's been happening. Don't worry about that right now, okay? I've been so paranoid, schizophrenic all day. I don't know what to even think of the world right now. I don't know if I'm just insane or
Where's my...
sane. I don't know what's even sane in the world right now.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin, and this is Just Thought Lounge. JTL is the true crime channel that delivers serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. This case today brings us to Texas, where in early 2013, two well-intentioned friends picked up a young, troubled ex-Marine. The plan was an afternoon of intended bonding and healing at the shooting range. Chris Kyle, a veteran of the Iraq War and the most effective sniper in US history, had made a promise to the ex-Marine's mother that he would do everything he could to help her son. The Marine, Eddie Ray Routh, like Chris and many others, had struggled with post-traumatic stress after serving in the US military. Chad Littlefield, a kind-hearted soccer dad, neighbor, and close friend of Chris's, came along for support. No one knows exactly...
Okay, please don't get this wrong, anybody. I did watch another documentary, and it was a war documentary, and there was another another sniper. I want to say during the Vietnam War, they used to call him White Feather because he used to wear a white feather in his helmet, and I believe he's the most decorated sniper in U.S. history. That's not taking away anything from Chris Kyle. The most I remember hearing of Chris Kyle was Jesse Ventura. And for those of you who don't really know who he is, he started off in the WWF, wrestling. And then, of course, he's in the movie Predator carrying the Gatling gun. He was a big dude. And so he ran for governor of Minnesota, became governor of Minnesota. Then he got crazy into conspiracy theories. And there were, once a year, the Navy SEALs have like a reunion of sorts where all the Navy SEALs go and, like bond, like camaraderie, once a year. It's just a gathering, a get-together. And I guess Chris Kyle had been, again, allegedly, he had been talking a lot of shit about Jesse Ventura, that he was just a fake, SEAL, allegedly, and so on and so forth. So when, right as he's saying this, Jesse Ventura files a defamation of character lawsuit against Chris Kyle, and then Chris Kyle gets killed, and it was his wife that was stuck with the burden because the jury found that Chris Kyle was indeed guilty, and she was ordered to pay $2.3 million, in which he totally gave to charity. That's the extent that I know. Of course, I've seen the movie American Sniper. Other than that, I really don't know much about him, but I just kind of wanted to fill in some backstory of what I knew of him.
Exactly what happened inside Eddie's mind that day, but after only a short time at the range, he turned his gun on his companions. The actions that Eddie took afterwards, some seemingly sensible and others very bizarre, became the source of debate in the prosecution that followed. Eddie claimed he was paranoid. He said he believed in pig-human hybrid assassins. He said he was schizophrenic, and he claimed he did what he had to do. But how much of that was true? Let's take a look. Eddie Ray Routh was a good kid. He went to school in Lancaster, Texas, and then later in Midlothian. His grades were okay, and he played in Little League and enjoyed football. From an early age, Eddie had an aspiration to join the Marine Corps. After graduating high school in 2006, this is exactly what he did. He graduated as a private first class and began training in small arms weapon repair. In September 2007, Eddie was deployed to a forward operating base about 60 miles north of Baghdad, where he repaired weapons and worked as a prison guard for 6 months. He also spent 7 months as an armorer on a ship in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. But it was his final deployment on a humanitarian mission to Haiti in January 2010, following the earthquake that devastated the country, that Eddie would claim had the most impact on him. He told his parents he was responsible for clearing the land of debris, but also victims from the disaster. He spoke of the horrors he witnessed there. When he returned from Haiti, according to his mother Jody and his sister Laura, he was not the same Eddie. He was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps in 2010. He was 23 years old at that time. In late July 2011, a little more than a year after he was honorably discharged from the Marines, Eddie appeared at the Dallas VA, the Veteran Administration Hospital, complaining that a tapeworm, which doctors found did not exist, was eating away at his insides. This is when the VA first diagnosed him as having PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Over the next year and through 2012, Eddie's symptoms grew worse. During this time, Eddie was in and out of the hospital, both voluntarily as well as against his will, as his family tried to cope with his bizarre and increasingly violent behavior. These incidents culminated in an episode on the 19th of January 2013.
You know, I had mentioned this in one video, and that was something that I was always scared of. After music and the entertainment industry, my mom used to run, how can you say it? She worked for a nonprofit organization, but she ran the program that helped single mothers in need, and it was called the TANF program, where it helped single mothers on welfare with housing, food stamps, things of that nature. And so I grew up like knowing many of them, my mom being one of the 9 managers, and another one of the managers, was in desperate need of a supervisor at the Denver VA Medical Center. And at first I said no, because I was really leaving my team, hanging because of how much work we were behind on. But once I finished that up, I went ahead and left and worked at the Denver VA Medical Center. And there wasn't a day that went by where, we all know the terrible service that the VA was providing to the patients at the time. It hit national news regarding the egregious, wait times that these poor patients were having to go through. I could recall one time in particular, every single elevator but the freight elevators stopped working. And there were people carrying other people in their wheelchairs up the stairs. They wouldn't let them use the freight elevators for some goddamn reason. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm a supervisor. I'm not a chief, and it goes, supervisor, chief of staff, and then director. And the director at the time, she really didn't seem too proactive on wanting to make things better. And that was one example of that. It always crossed my mind that, these guys are going to get so fed up that one of them is going to come in here with a gun and just start letting off on people because of the treatment that they've received. There's a movie coming out with Ray Boyega, Finn from Star Wars. He looks completely different now, but about his, it's based on a true story about his VA funds. There's a lot of people who get really just, I don't want to say bent out of shape, but they get really, they provide a service for their country. They come back with so many problems, and that was part of my job. I was a vocational training counselor, and so I worked with patients with PTSD, anxiety, schizophrenia, anything that would have a documented disability, to help normalize their, work life so they could work 40 hours a week and maintain a job while maintaining themselves as far as, cleanliness and grooming. And, it was such a good program, and I absolutely loved helping out people. seeing them get hired and seeing them cry, it just, oh my God, I used to choke up so bad because, you know, it was their hard work that got them there, and they've already done enough by serving this country. And so it hits real close to home whenever I hear about this. You know, I didn't have the chance to serve. I was in college, and then the record label shortly after that. But I mean, it's just, yeah, it was a privilege beyond belief, and one that I will never ever forget. Um, you know, another thing, one more thing that really had pissed me off was after, you know, I think it was 60 Minutes broke the news about the wait times for the patients at the VA, and they were doing something about it. The secretary of the VA stepped down and a new one came in. Well, the new one who came in, they went all the fuck out cleaning the hospital from top to bottom. I mean, that bitch looked like you could eat off the floor, and that place was nasty. And I remember one of the girls walking by is like, "Oh, are you gonna go listen to what's his name talk?" I'm like, "I could give a fuck less if he talks." I'm like, "Look at this." She's like, "It looks nice." I'm like, "They do this for one man, but they don't do this for our fucking, you know, our servicemen and women who come here every goddamn day. They make it look nice for some guy who, you know, is only going to be a secretary for the interim until the new, you know, until, you know, the new party steps in." I'm like, this is bullshit. And so, yeah, a lot of the federal government shit is backwards. I'm sorry, the video is going to be quite long, so I'll keep it short.
When Eddie barricaded himself, his girlfriend Jennifer Weed, and her roommate inside their apartment. Holding first a decorative ninja sword followed by a kitchen knife, he refused to let anyone leave. Police were called in by the roommate, and Eddie was sent to Green Oaks, a private hospital in Dallas. A doctor noted that in addition to suffering from PTSD, Eddie appeared to be in the throes of first-break schizophrenia, a condition that often appeared in early adulthood. These early signs of schizophrenia did not constitute a formal diagnosis for Eddie. Green Oaks was not his treating hospital. On January 21st, he was transferred back into the care of the Dallas VA, who had already diagnosed PTSD. Here, Eddie was prescribed medication and released after 3 days. The VA found that his actions were induced by an alcohol and marijuana binge, coupled with coming off his existing medications. The VA records note that during a follow-up visit 5 days after his discharge, Eddie exhibited no signs of hallucinations or delusions. That was a positive sign and a temporary relief to his family. A week later, Eddie was invited out to the shooting range with Chris Kyle and Chad Littlefield.
It's terrible.
Yes, ma'am. My brother just came by here. I was at He's now left, but he told me that he's committed a murder. I'm terrified for my life.
Okay, hold on.
Because I don't know if he's going to come back here.
Okay. What's his name and what did he leave in?
His name is Eddie Routh. Listen, I don't know if he's being honest with me.
I know.
Apparently, like, I'm just really terrified. I don't even know where your police department is. Is it over there?
Over by the
It
highway.
used to be the church.
Yes, ma'am.
It used to be a church.
I'm just going to stay on the phone with you until you get here, okay? And who did he say he had killed?
I'm sorry, guys.
He said that he killed 2 guys. They went out to a shooting range, and he's all crazy. I don't know if he's on drugs or not, but I know that he's been. Let me talk to you. My husband's going to talk to you because I'm so nervous.
He said he killed 2 guys at a shooting range.
Shooting range he was talking about?
He didn't say.
He didn't say, okay.
He was recently diagnosed with PTSD.
With what?
He's been acting PTSD.
PTSD?
And he's been acting real weird. He was just got out of the mental hospital, actually.
Okay, what hospital did he get out of?
Green Oaks.
When did he get out of Green Oaks?
About a week ago.
Chris Kyle and Chad Littlefield collected Eddie earlier that day from his uncle's house. Eddie had never formally met with Chris or Chad before. On that Saturday, the 2nd of February, they picked up Eddie and headed to Rough Creek Lodge, a high-end family and corporate resort which offered, amongst many other outdoor activities, a very fine shooting range. The group stopped to eat some burgers on the drive out. They arrived at the lodge at roughly 3:30 that afternoon when Chris popped into the main building to register their presence before driving further out to where the shooting range was located on the vast property. The group's collection of guns had been unloaded from the back of Chris's truck, a black Ford 350, and several rounds had been fired at the targets. Then, at some point between 4 and 4:30 p.m., Eddie turned his gun on Chad Littlefield and fired multiple shots.
God.
He then turned on Chris Kyle, firing from 2 different handguns. He stood quietly afterwards for 1 minute, and then he got into Chris's truck and he drove off. Eddie made a few stops after leaving Rough Creek Lodge. He went back to his uncle's house, then to his sister Laura's, which prompted the 911 call. Eddie even made a stop at a Taco Bell. He expected he would be arrested, so he thought he should have something to eat first. When he returned to his house the second time, it was around 7 p.m. There he was greeted by a heavy police presence. Eddie's neighbor, Jesse Chivera, a police detective, attempted to coax Eddie from the truck. The conversation, a kind of standoff, lasts about 30 minutes in total. The exchange is punctuated with disconnected and bizarre statements, sometimes questions from Eddie. He asks, "Is it voodoo that is upon us? Is this about hell walking on earth right now?" As well as more straightforward statements such as, "I don't know if I'm going insane."
Okay, but we can't let you move right now, Eddie. I'm not gonna move it. I'm gonna sit right here where I'm at. Okay? Don't keep the lights on me. I'll keep my hands closed. Okay. Eddie, why can't we just go talk about this somewhere else? Why do we have to talk about it here? I'm sorry? Why can't you get in the truck with me? Well, you know, there's more than one way to do it, but we need to do it on neutral territory. We need to talk about it, me and you. If you want to talk about it, I'll walk with you over here, but, you know, I need to see that, you know, we can talk about this peaceably without anybody be nervous. And that would be you coming out with your hands so we can talk about this thing. Is this about like hell walking on earth right now? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but hell's walking on earth with us right now.
Telling you to walk over to the house and talk to him because they're out in the same breath.
Well, what I'm trying to tell you is that I'll walk over here to your house, to your front yard, and my hands will be open and your hands will be open, and we can talk about this. And we can call your mom and dad on my phone, and you can tell them that you need to see them.
While Jesse attempted to talk sense into his confused neighbor, other officers surrounding the truck were devising a way to capture Eddie from the vehicle. They thought that if Eddie could lower his window, they could approach and incapacitate him with a taser gun.
So, if he rolls that window down all the way, if you to hand the phone to him, I think when you snap, yeah, taser.
Hey, say that again, I couldn't hear you. Okay, you need to get somebody with some flashbangs out here.
Listen to me. You think you can talk him into, you're not gonna get in the fucking truck with him and say, hey, you want me to get in the truck with you, but you gotta roll the fucking window down so I can look around and make sure there's no threats. And,
Eddie,
and
okay,
if he rolls the window down,
I'm sure you're hearing what we're saying, right? Okay, that's why we're talking here, so you don't feel like we're trying to talk behind your back.
They would not have an opportunity to play this out.
Eddie, 5 minutes, Eddie, okay?
Eddie started the truck, he stated something about taking a nap, and then he drove off.
And
Eddie
the hell
led
didn't
police on
they
a car
back him
chase through
in?
the suburb of Lancaster, heading towards the highway. At one point, a police cruiser T-boned the truck from the right side, as captured by the dashcam footage from the vehicle of Sergeant Logan. This does not end the chase, at least not at first. Fluids from the truck appear to spray out onto Sergeant Logan's windshield. As Eddie merged out onto the highway, the truck began to give out. It slowed to a stop and the pursuing officers were able to surround the vehicle. Eddie then emerged from the truck, hands held out, and is taken down by the police. Two hours after Eddie had driven Chris's truck from the shooting range, an employee drove out and discovered Chris and Chad. Chris was lying face down in front of the deck where he had been firing towards the targets. He had been shot 6 times with a .45 caliber pistol. Chad had been shot 7 times with a 9mm Sig Sauer handgun. The autopsy on Chad would later reveal that he was shot, at least initially, in the back. Chris had dispensed with all of the rounds he had been firing on the range. Both of the friends had loaded pistols on their persons, but in holsters and with their safeties on. Both of the guns used by Eddie Routh had been Chris Kyle's. Eddie waited in the back of a police cruiser following his apprehension on the highway. At one point, after nearly 20 minutes, he appears to begin to fall asleep. Officers speak with him on and off as they prepare to bring him into the station for formal questioning.
Just so nervous about what's been happening in my life today. I don't know what's been happening. Don't worry about that right now, okay? I've been so paranoid, schizophrenic all day, I don't know what to even think of the world right now. I don't know if I'm insane or sane. I don't know what's even sane in the world right now.
Eddie had told his sister Laura that afternoon while sitting at her kitchen table that he had taken 2 souls that day before they could take mine. He also said to her that he had sold his soul for a pickup truck. Chad Littlefield was born in Dallas, Texas, and lived his whole life in the state. He was the father to a young daughter. His wife, Leanne, was an assistant principal at a Midlothian middle school. Chad worked as a logistics manager at an oil services firm. He and Chris Kyle met as neighbors and formed a close friendship. They were both dedicated fathers. They were workout buddies. Chad Littlefield was not quite 36 years old when he was shot dead by Eddie Routh. Chris had worked as a ranch hand and even at the rodeo in his younger years before joining the Navy in 1999. While stationed in Southern California, he met his future wife, Taya. Their relationship was documented in part in Chris's autobiography that was later adapted into Clint Eastwood's blockbuster movie, American Sniper. Chris did 4 tours as a Navy SEAL sniper in Iraq, registering 160 official kills, the most ever in American history. He was a celebrated war hero and famous for both his service and his later commitment to helping veterans. Chris, like his friend Chad, was also a husband and father. His son was 8 years old and his daughter 6 when he was killed. Over 7,000 people attended his funeral service, which was held at Cowboy Stadium. The Texas governor, Greg Abbott, later declared the 2nd of February, the anniversary of the shootings, to be Chris Kyle Day. Eddie was brought into the station for questioning that night. He remained handcuffed for the duration of the interrogation and time spent in the room, which was over an hour and a half. While awaiting the detectives, he shifts around in his seat, stands up a few times, and at one point he even lays his head down on the desk. Before the interview even formally begins, it becomes clear that Eddie is either purposefully or perhaps unavoidably speaking in confused sentences about seemingly related, then very unrelated topics. He doesn't make much sense.
Everybody knows me the right thing to do this, you know what I mean?
What'd you say?
The right thing is the wrong thing to do in the world.
Yeah.
There is certain things you gotta try to do. I just know my mom and dad aren't too late. Sorry. Good. I can talk with you a little bit this evening. I didn't have that rough time. I haven't had a pretty rough time of it. Right. I just wanna sit in here and visit with you and talk to you tonight, see what I can do. Is there anywhere you can take it off? I have been talking to these guys about doing that. Still trying to find out what's
stuff. Me too. Let me get trying to find out more about the world that I've been living in too. I never knew I was in this deep when I was looking at the computer screens when I was in Iraq. I never thought it was. Sure. I mean, you can look at, you know, yeah. When you're looking at the screen, it doesn't make sense to you at the time, but then you really realize what's happening, you know. Yeah. Like, it's astonishing, you know. What? Exactly. What? Right. It's so sad how it had to happen and stuff, you know, and how it did happen. Yeah, it's, I just wish it would stop, you know. If there are world councils that can speak about this, there has to be, to keep people accountable. Yeah. You know? Right. Evidently, you know? You're right. For stuff like this that people that you can't walk on the ground with because they never walked on the same ground with you, you know what I mean? Right. Well, I want you to know, I work for the Texas Rangers, and what we do is we investigate major crimes, homicides. We have all the resources that we utilize to look into those kinds of cases. You understand what I'm saying? Right. And I know what you went through today has been very difficult for you. And I want to talk about what happened. And you can start with when you woke up today and what happened. Well, you know, I keep talking to Chris, you know. I keep talking to Chris in my world. Seems like every time I talk to another man named Chris, I just get sent to another man named Chris. I think about talking to the wolf, you know, to the one in the sky.
What the fuck?
What? The ones in the sky are the ones that fly, you know what I mean? The pigs in the world. They can truly say they're pigs.
The reference that Eddie makes in this interview to pigs was a recurring theme in his claimed delusions. Despite the nonsensical narratives that he strings together for Ranger Briley, he managed brief moments of clarity, including expressing remorse for his actions. He also crucially admitted that he recognized his actions were wrong.
It wasn't a want to or a need, it was a need. I had to get out of that situation I was in today. That may have not known. I was going to be the next one that would be up there getting my head shot completely off, you know. You know, what you did today is wrong, right? You understand that? Yes, sir. Is there anything you'd like to say to the families? Yeah, I'm just sorry for what I've done, you know.
Not surprisingly, Eddie entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The basis of his defense was not that he had PTSD, which is a condition that would not lead to the type of delusions or the other troubling behavior Eddie had exhibited. His team instead sought to prove he was schizophrenic. This disorder is marked by the sorts of delusions and paranoia Eddie had claimed to have experienced, and, left untreated, it can lead to violent behavior. The VA had never diagnosed Eddie as schizophrenic, though, only with post-traumatic stress. Chris Kyle had struggled with PTSD himself. It was a condition that he understood and helped others to overcome. But the behavior that Eddie was exhibiting that day must have come across differently. During the trip to the shooting range, a worried Chris had texted Chad while in the vehicle. "This dude is straight up nuts," read the text. "He's sitting right behind me, watch my 6, Chad texted back, using a military reference for watching one's back. American Sniper, which starred Bradley Cooper as Chris Kyle, was already in theaters in Stephenville, Texas, in Routh County, when Eddie Routh's murder trial began there on the 11th of February 2014. Potential jurors were required to fill out forms about whether they had already seen the film or read Chris's book of the same name. Having done so did not exclude any one person from jury duty, though the potential for bias could not be entirely averted. This was a murder trial where one of the victims was a celebrated Texan war hero. Chris Kyle's devastated widow, Taya, took the stand on the first day of the trial. Taya explained the not-for-profit work that her husband undertook. She also gave insight into the dynamic of the friendship between her husband and Chad.
Impression was Chris, I guess, a real chatty guy.
No, it's when he had to do interviews or whatever, he was extremely intelligent and could, easily have those conversations and talk if you needed to him or convey whatever. But if given his choice, we used to laugh actually, because there was at one point I said, I think he said he'd be happy if all he ever had to do was grunt, just whatever. But then when it was time to turn it on, he turned it on, and.
How about Chad? Was he a real talker?
No, same thing. I mean, I had a lot of good conversations with Chad, and he was just a really neat person. You could joke with him so easily, which I think is part of what they loved about each other, is that they had a similar sense of humor.
The shooting range trip was designed as a bonding session, during which they could share experiences from their time in the service and how to cope with life afterwards.
I specifically chose a place that was beautiful and peaceful and that gave some time to talk, so that they could talk for an hour and a half on the way down, or, like happens with a lot of people, shoot first, then if they're bonded on the way home, talk, like I was saying about the bonfires sometimes. After you do the shooting is when the real talk happens, but he specifically chose a place down there. So he anticipated maybe hour and a half there, hour and a half back, hour shooting was about how it was supposed to go.
Eddie would later tell the psychiatrists who were assessing his mental state that he became progressively more agitated and suspicious throughout the drive out to Rough Creek Lodge because his companions wouldn't talk to him. He was also suspicious of the lengthy drive and couldn't understand why he was being taken so far out when they could find a shooting range much closer. Chris had not shaken his hand when they first met, which offended him. They had stopped for burgers on the way, and Chris bought him a meal and insisted that he eat it. But he wasn't hungry, he had said, so why was he being force-fed? Only weeks before the shooting, Eddie had suffered his most severe psychotic break to date. When it happened, he was at the apartment of his new girlfriend, Jennifer Weed. This was the incident with the ninja sword that ultimately led to Eddie's stay at Green Oaks Hospital, followed by a transfer to the VA facility in Dallas. Jen explained how he had been calm in the morning, preparing to leave for an appointment. He waited on her couch as she got ready.
So I went to get ready. I told him if he wanted me to take him, I would take him. So I asked him to go look up the address or get the address while I was getting ready. I came out after getting ready and I was like, okay, well, let's go. And he was sitting on our couch and he was wearing a light blue polo that he had gotten from one of my brothers.
This was in the morning?
Yes, probably 10 o'clock-ish in the morning. And he was visibly shaking, and he had sweat through the shirt to the point where you could see very large stains. And I was like, okay, let's go. And
Did it concern you that he was sweating through his shirt?
Yeah, I tried to get him to get a glass of water, tried to ask him what was going on. He didn't want water, he didn't want to talk about it. So I asked him if he was ready to go. And at the time we had decorative ninja swords by our front door. So when we got towards the front door, he grabbed one of those swords and said, no, we're not going anywhere. And proceeded to insist that people were out to get us and we needed to stay in the apartment because the apartment was safe.
The incident escalated when Eddie swapped out the decorative ninja sword for a kitchen knife. He barricaded the front door of her apartment and held Jen and her roommate hostage. Eddie said that he believed he was protecting them from the evils of the world. Just 3 days after he arrived at the hospital, the VA prepared to discharge Eddie. His mother, Jody, believed he was not ready. He still had crying spells and seemed generally unstable. She requested her son be kept at the hospital until he could be admitted to a residential treatment program for PTSD in Waco. However, there was an application process and a wait time. Jody begged the social worker to cut the red tape and get her son admitted as soon as possible, but according to the VA, he needed to be released because he was no longer showing symptoms and they did not deem him a risk to himself or others.
Did you ever plead with the Dallas VA not to release your son?
Absolutely, I did. On Thursday, they called me at school and said, "We're releasing Eddie. You need to pick him up."
I would submit to the court that's the president's impression. That is an exception of hearsay rule based on that comment.
Overruled.
So what did the Dallas VA tell you?
They said, "Okay, we'll keep him." They kept him on Thursday because I objected and said he's not ready.
You meant a longer period of time, didn't you? Not just one day.
Yes, I did.
But you begged the U.S. government not to release your son and they still released him.
Yes, sir.
By the time this occurred, Jody had already arranged an introduction with Chris Kyle and her son. Jody was a teaching assistant at the elementary school where Chris's kids attended, so she would often see him picking them up and dropping them off. On one of these occasions, Jody approached Chris about meeting with Eddie. By the time the two of them arranged to meet, however, it was weeks later and Eddie had been in and out of the hospital in the meantime. Jody said that if she had been aware of their plans on that Saturday, she would have told Chris that it was a bad idea.
I shared with him that Eddie was having trouble, that the VA had diagnosed him with post-traumatic stress disorder. And
Now that's the VA that said that, correct?
the VA said that, yes. And Chris said he understood that because he also had post-traumatic stress. And he said he would love to do anything and everything in his power to help my son.
A handful of mental health professionals offered their opinions on Eddie's diagnosis and his state of mind at the time of the shooting. Dr. Mitchell Dunn laid the foundation for the defense. He outlined a few of the many delusional beliefs that Eddie had outlined to him. Amongst them was the belief that his neighbor, Jesse, the detective with the Lancaster Police Department, was actually a member of the Mexican Mafia. On separate occasions, he also thought that Jesse and his wife were cannibals and that they had been eating his excrement through a connection in the sewer pipes. He further believed that two co-workers of his at the cabinet shop where he occasionally worked were cannibals that were scheming to slow roast and eat him. His delusions involved hybrid pig people, and this was connected to his girlfriend Jennifer. These were the delusions he was experiencing on the day of the shootings.
He said he got up, it was still dark. He made breakfast. He made a breakfast of egg and bacon sandwiches. He made it for himself and Jennifer. And that he watched her consume a piece of bacon, even though she said she really wasn't hungry. He thought that was pretty weird. Yeah. Because he was thinking she was a pig hybrid. Why would you eat your own flesh?
Dr. Dunn spoke about Eddie's ongoing concern that he would be cooked and eaten. His conclusion was that these delusions fed into his belief that Chad Littlefield was intending to kill him, and so he shot both men in what he believed was self-defense.
He began to think that both Mr. Kyle and Mr. Littlefield were some type of pig assassins, the hybrid pigs sent here to kill people. He knew that you kill somebody, the police will look for you, but at the same time he thought he did what he had to do. He was going to be killed or he would have to kill them.
The prosecution did not need to prove that Eddie was not mentally ill, only that he knew that his actions were wrong at the time that he took them. They presented evidence, however, that Eddie was not schizophrenic at all. He had a personality disorder, showed narcissistic behaviors, and he had a substance abuse problem. It was suggested that the pig hybrid delusion was invented by Eddie after the fact and was perhaps inspired by an episode of Seinfeld which jokingly referenced pig people. An episode that Eddie had, conveniently, reportedly watched while in jail. The state psychiatrist Dr. Price said Eddie suffered from cannabis-induced psychotic symptoms.
If it induces it, if cannabis induces the psychotic symptoms, they can last longer than the period of intoxication. they can last for days, a month, even longer.
So say somebody's they're not high anymore, but can they still be experiencing these cannabis-induced psychotic symptoms?
That's correct.
And is there some analogy that you can give to the jury, to make it?
Well, it's like if you were going to start a fire to barbecue, and you have coals in the barbecue pit, and you put the starter fluid on them, that ignites them. That's inducing the fire. The fire in the charcoal continues long after the lighter fluid has burned off. And so that's what we're talking about.
According to Dr. Price, Eddie had faked a schizophrenic condition. Eddie had established a pattern, but that pattern was one of avoiding responsibility for his actions by using his mental instability as a veteran as an excuse.
And then he said at one point, I'm feeling paranoid and schizophrenic today.
Yeah.
What's your take on that as a forensic psychologist?
Well, typically individuals with schizophrenia don't have that much insight into what's going on. I think
That's true.
he knew what was going on. I think he knew he was in a lot of trouble, and that he was setting the stage for, it wasn't my fault.
After the knife incident on January the 19th with Jan Weed and her roommate.
Yes, it did.
Yeah,
Violent
it's
act,
capital
police
murder.
are called, and he goes to the hospital.
Right.
And so do you think those comments in the back seat of that car, like you just said, he's setting the stage for that to happen again?
Yes, that seems like it's likely to me.
Are there indications, though, that you saw throughout your interview and everything that you've reviewed that shows that the defendant knows what he did was wrong?
Yes,
Can you give us some examples of that?
I can. He did choose the time that he was going to shoot them. He said that, or he considered killing them on the way to the gun range, but he resisted because if he shot them while they were driving, they might have an accident that could hurt him.
Okay.
He did pick an opportunistic time, as Chris Kyle had just emptied the gun he was shooting and had his back turned. And he said also to Dr. Dunn that he had just loaded a fresh magazine. I just checked my sight picture. He said, I was a 3rd award expert rifleman. I think I shot sharpshooter with the pistol.
Does that seem like a little bit of bragging to you?
It did, yes. He told me, as I said, that as soon as he shot them, he said, Jesus Christ, what have I done? And then felt instantly remorseful, indicating that he knew it was wrong.
Dr. Michael Arambula largely agreed with the assessment from Dr. Price, though he placed less stock in the cannabis-induced psychosis. He agreed that Eddie was most likely faking and overstating his condition as an excuse for his actions. The doctor said that schizophrenia is characterized by an individual experiencing one or maybe only a few central delusions. All other delusional thoughts, he said, would emanate from this. In Eddie's case, he claimed multiple, seemingly disconnected delusions.
When you see people that have something like, they have schizophrenia, do you generally see that they have a certain fixed number of delusions?
Typically it's low, 1, 2, maybe 3, that's about it.
Okay. Sort of their top 1 to 3 delusions.
Typically it's 1, maybe 2. Occasionally I've seen 3, maybe 4, but it's always on the low end.
And then did he also talk to you about his experience in Haiti?
Yes.
But did you ever come across anything, any traumatic experience that would be the basis of a PTSD diagnosis?
None.
No T in the PTSD.
Right, I'd never heard that before. I'll have to remember that. The videotape of him saying maybe he had schizophrenia or maybe he was insane, so I perceived it clinically as an example of what's called secondary gain, i.e. he was trying to look out for himself.
In what?
Avoid being severely punished.
If somebody was paranoid, schizophrenic, or one or the other, would they generally be able to tell you that?
No. People that have severe mental illness have big difficulty accepting that they do. It's just part of it.
So you view those statements about, am I going to the insane asylum and I feel paranoid and schizophrenia as?
He was showing his hand already. In other words, he was looking to get out of what he had done.
That usually people only have one delusion, certainly no more than 3. And I'm simply not familiar with that concept. That's nothing I ever heard before in terms of either my training or what I've taught. I've been board certified in psychiatry and then had to be recertified twice, most recently last year. I've never heard of that concept. And I can tell you that at the state hospital where I deal with people with schizophrenia all the time, we don't count their number of delusions. I have a number of people in the hospital with, more than 3 delusions, and we don't say, oh, it's more than 3, you don't have a delusion or you don't have schizophrenia.
Basically, also, Dr. Emler testified that the interview that my client gave with Ranger Briley was basically a red herring. It was inconsistent with any mental illness. What's your position on that?
I thought that interview with Ranger Briley was really the best kind of real-time evidence that we had regarding his mental state at the time. There was an hour or so of interview, and then you got to kind of watch him beforehand, a little bit afterward. And to me, that wasn't the red herring. That was what showed the way his mental state actually was. And I can tell you this, as much time as I've spent with people with schizophrenia, I couldn't have done what Eddie Routh did if I was trying to fake mental illness, if I was trying to purposefully get something across. The capacity to, answer those questions in such an unusual manner, I couldn't have done unless I was reading off some type of script, because he really, was asked a question, and then sometimes the very beginning of it might be in response to the question, but then he kind of went off in another way entirely, off on tangents. And people who are able to think clearly, I don't think they can replicate that at all. So to me, that was the very character of mental illness there. That wasn't a red herring. That was Eddie Routh in his state on that day. Mr. Routh was kind of setting up a possible insanity defense, because when he was back of the police car, he said something about, I've been paranoid and schizophrenic all day, am I going to the insane asylum? And then he's in custody of the police, and he goes to the Lancaster police station. He's waiting, and we watch him there, waiting. He's got his head down on the table, and he's kind of walking around. And if that was the case, and I would think during that time he would really be putting together the opportunity to, really present his idea, to say, officer, I'm really crazy, and this is what I was thinking. But instead, the officer walks in. The very first thing that Mr. Routh says, and I'm quoting here, "Everybody knows there are right things to do. You know what I mean? The right thing and the wrong things to do in the world. There are certain things you got to start doing. Seriously, I just hope my mom and dad aren't too late. Why is this world, why didn't we see it coming before?" So that's not the message of a guy that's trying to set up an insanity defense. That's the guy who's just kind of talking about what's on his mind. And then the officer says to him, "We'll have to talk to these guys about doing that stuff." After he asks about getting the handcuffs off, he responds, "Me too. I'm trying to find out more about the world that I've been living in too. I never knew I was in this deep. When I was looking at those computer screens when I was in Iraq, I never thought I was. I mean, you look at those computer screens, doesn't make sense to you at the time, then you realize what's happening, it's like astonishing, So here's his opportunity to kind of present his case, and he's not making a whole lot of sense. He's talking about something about the computer screens that made sense to him, but doesn't make sense to us. And that's the character of schizophrenia. That is the disorganized thinking that you heard me testify about last week. And I think the evidence is here throughout. I'm not going to necessarily quote everything, but if he was setting up the insanity defense, I think you would have heard that. I don't think he's smart enough to know that the character of mental illness is disorganized thinking. mean, most people, they're going to say, officer, I was hearing the voices tell me to do such a thing. We didn't hear that from Mr. Routh. We heard this.
In Texas law, to be not guilty by reason of insanity requires that the defense team prove that at the time of the act, the defendant, due to a severe mental illness, did not know that their actions were wrong. This meant that the jury could find that Eddie had been proven by the defense to be insane, but regardless, if he knew what he did was wrong at the time he did it, the law dictated he was just as guilty as someone of sane mind. The prosecution, however, continued to argue that Eddie Routh was not insane at all. The prosecution closed by reminding the jury of the seemingly logical train of thought expressed by Eddie that afternoon.
As he asked him, if you were so bothered by Chad, why not just shoot Chad? And he says, because if I shot Chad, Chris would have shot me. So he had to shoot them both. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not insanity. That is just cold, calculated capital murder. And he's guilty of capital murder. And he was not, by any means, insane.
On the 24th of February 2015, a jury found Eddie Ray Routh guilty of murder. It took the jury only about 3 hours to reach the verdict, and the judge handed down the sentence immediately. The former Marine was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole. Jurors were interviewed afterwards and asked how they interpreted the evidence that led to their decision. One juror stated that the defense simply had not made the case that Eddie was clinically insane.
He admitted that when he was riding in the back of the truck on the way to the shooting range, that he said he considered killing them then. But he knew if he did that the truck would wreck and he would get hurt. The defense never proved that beyond, the preponderance of the evidence that he was clinically insane.
American Sniper grossed more than $400 million worldwide. After her testimony, but before the jury began their deliberations, Taya attended the Oscars ceremony in support of the film that told her husband's story. The movie was up for 6 awards that night, including Best Picture. She also later published her own book called American Wife and launched a nonprofit in Chris's memory, the Taya and Chris Kyle Foundation, which provides support for first responder and military families. Chris Kyle had served 4 combat tours in Operation Iraqi Freedom and other clandestine operations for the United States Navy and Marines. For his bravery in battle, he was awarded 2 Silver Stars, 5 Bronze Stars with Valor, 2 Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medals, as well as 1 Navy and Marine Corps Commendation. He was shot twice, survived multiple helicopter crashes, and was involved in 6 IED attacks.
Wow.
Despite all of this, Chris was quoted stating, "I was always a better husband and father than I ever was a sniper." That was the tragic story of Chad Littlefield, Chris Kyle, and their deaths at the hands of Eddie Ray Routh. Thanks for examining this case with me today. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge. I'll see you in the next one.
What a fucking sicko, man. Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely right. He kind of had it all planned out to where he thought he was going to be able to plead the insanity, and he just kind of kept on digging himself in a hole by saying the stupid shit that he was. Just because somebody starts, saying some off-the-wall shit, it doesn't mean that they're insane. He certainly must have thought so. But, I mean, 2 guys that befriend you, and you're going to act like that, I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier. What might be the norm for some of us, for others having the ability to kill someone else, that's not normal for the most of us. But for somebody like him, like, what is it? What's their thought process? Like, it just, I don't know. It blows my mind because I wish I knew why they would think the way they do, that would be a solvable outcome, because not only are they ruining the lives of families, but then they're ruining their own lives and the lives of their loved ones as well. And so I don't know. He deserves to be where he's at, though. Taking the coward's way out and shooting somebody in their back when they're unaware and not looking. I mean, total piece of shit. But anyways, Miss AM dash S, thank you so much for recommending this. This was a very good video. I wasn't too familiar with the case. I knew of the case, but I didn't know the details of the case, and I found it very interesting. I found it very upsetting because I wish that somebody like Chris Kyle and his friend didn't go out like that. They were still relatively young and had their whole lives to live, especially after going through something as horrific as being overseas in war and finally getting that chance to be home with their family and raise children, and this happens. I mean, it's just totally, it's uncalled for. But thank you guys again for viewing. For any of you guys that are new, please feel free to like and subscribe. I try to put out some videos every day for now. It's just something I'd like to do for fun. Do a whole bunch of different types of videos, from true crime, ghost stories, funny stuff, you name it. So, yeah. Until next time, peace out.